She's just trying to help Melissa, my mom said dismissively, folding napkins at the dining room table. Not everyone has your unique approach to life. My throat tightened as I looked around the family dinner table. No one made eye contact with me. Not my brother Mark, not my father with his suddenly fascinating mashed potatoes, and certainly not Sarah, my brother's new girlfriend, whose lips curled into the faintest smile. The only one looking at me was my 12-year-old son Jason, his eyes narrowed with a perception beyond his years. Started with that first family dinner 6 months ago. Sarah had arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and compliments for everyone. Everyone except me. Oh, Melissa. That's an interesting outfit choice. So brave of you to wear patterns like that at your age, she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'd brushed it off, chalking it up to first meeting awkwardness. Little did I know it was the opening salvo in a carefully orchestrated campaign. I was just telling a funny story about college, Sarah said now, her hands perfectly manicured, her engagement ring catching the light as she reached for her water glass. I didn't mean to imply that Melissa's academic struggles were her fault. Some people just aren't cut out for higher education. Her voice lowered to a stage whisper. And that's perfectly fine. The truth? I'd left college to help pay for Mark's education after Dad's heart attack strained our family finances. I'd planned to go back, but life happened. A whirlwind romance, Jason's birth, then single motherhood after his father left. I'd built a decent life for us, working my way up at the local bank despite not having a degree. But Sarah had somehow twisted my sacrifice into a failure. Mom didn't struggle in college, Jason piped up suddenly, his fork clattering against his plate. She left to help Uncle Mark. She told me the story. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah recovered first, reaching over to pat Jason's hand. What an active imagination you have. Your mom probably didn't want you to feel bad about her not finishing. That's what good mothers do, protect their children from difficult truths. I opened my mouth to object, but my father cut in. Let's change the subject. Mark, how's the expansion at the hardware store coming along? As conversation shifted, I caught the look that passed between Sarah and my mother. Some unspoken understanding that excluded me. It wasn't the first time. Since Sarah had started dating Mark 8 months ago, these moments had multiplied. A comment about my challenging son during Sunday brunch. A concerned discussion about my struggling finances within earshot at Thanksgiving. Small seeds of doubt planted carefully in fertile family soil. After dinner, I found Jason sitting on the back porch steps, throwing pebbles at a tree. You okay, bud? I asked, sitting beside him. I don't like her, he said flatly. She's mean to you when nobody's looking. Kids see things adults miss. While we're caught up in social niceties and the benefit of the doubt, they observe the unvarnished truth. She's important to Uncle Mark, I said carefully. Sometimes new people take time to fit into a family. Jason shook his head with certainty. She doesn't want to fit in. She wants to take over. The engagement announcement came 3 weeks later at another family dinner. Sarah flashed her diamond ring, and my parents practically tripped over themselves congratulating the happy couple. I hugged my brother sincerely. Despite everything, I wanted him to be happy. But when I embraced Sarah, she whispered, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you're included even though you're a mess." Family is family. My parents' attitudes shifted more dramatically after that. Suddenly, my opinions on family matters were discounted. Sarah thinks became the preface to decisions about holiday plans, family investments, even what to get Jason for his birthday. When I suggested we hold Mark's engagement party at the lakeside park where we'd spent summers growing up, my mother looked uncomfortable. Sarah's already found the perfect venue, she said. And honestly, Melissa, planning events isn't really your strong suit. You're so busy with everything. The planning meetings happened without me. We didn't want to burden you, my mother explained when I found out about them. Sarah said, with your work schedule and being a single mom, you already have so much on your plate. My exclusion was systematic but subtle. Too subtle to confront without seeming paranoid. My father, once my greatest champion, began making odd comments about my financial situation, and suggesting I consult with Mark about my future planning. Whenever I asked what he meant, he'd wave it off, saying, "Just thinking about your security, that's all." The final piece clicked into place 3 months before the wedding. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off photo albums for the rehearsal dinner slideshow. They weren't home, but they always kept a key under the planter for family. As I placed the albums on the dining room table, I noticed papers spread across my father's desk in the corner. Their estate planning documents. I shouldn't have looked. But a highlighted section caught my eye. My name with a notation about financial irresponsibility and supervised trust access. My stomach dropped. According to these documents, I would have limited access to any inheritance, with Mark serving as trustee to prevent mismanagement. This wasn't my parents' handwriting in the margins. The notes were made in a precise, feminine script I recognized from Sarah's thank you cards. Before I could process this, I heard a car in the driveway. I quickly arranged the albums and slipped out the back door, my mind racing. That night, as Jason and I ate dinner at our small kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sarah found the albums. She's concerned about some of the photos you chose. Says they don't present the family in the best light. We'll sort through them tomorrow. Mom. Jason's voice pulled me from my thoughts. You look upset. I forced a smile. Just tired, sweetie. It's Sarah again, isn't it? His perception startled me. I saw her go through your purse at Easter when you were helping Grandma in the kitchen. What? I put down my fork. Are you sure? Jason nodded solemnly. She took pictures of your bank statements with her phone. I was coming to tell you, but then she saw me watching. She said she was looking for a pen. The room seemed to tilt slightly. All the financial questions from my parents, their new concerns about my stability, it suddenly made terrible sense. Sarah hadn't just been undermining me socially. She'd been systematically dismantling my standing in the family by accessing and possibly manipulating information about my personal finances. I looked at my son, my brilliant, observant boy who had seen through Sarah's facade when the adults were still being charmed, and made a decision. Jason, I think we need to pay very close attention to Aunt Sarah from now on. Can you help me with that? His eyes lit up with purpose. I already am. The next weekend, Mark invited us over to watch the football game. I was hesitant, still processing what I'd learned about Sarah going through my personal information, but Jason insisted we go. We need to keep watching her, he whispered as we pulled into Mark's driveway. His determination both impressed and worried me. Mark's house was a modest two-story in a nice neighborhood, nothing fancy but comfortable. He'd inherited it from our grandparents and had been slowly renovating it. Sarah had moved in 3 months ago, and her touch was already evident in the new artwork and coordinated throw pillows. Melissa. And Jason. So glad you could make it, Sarah greeted us at the door, her voice rising an octave too high. She hugged me briefly, then ruffled Jason's hair in a way that made him stiffen. The guys are in the living room. I've set up the basement for the kids. There's a gaming console down there. Jason shot me a quick look. We hadn't discussed a strategy for today, but somehow he communicated his intent clearly. Is it okay if I go play downstairs, Mom? He asked, his innocent tone perfectly calibrated. Sure, sweetie. Have fun, I replied, watching as Sarah directed him toward the basement door. Such a good boy, Sarah commented as we headed toward the living room. Though a bit quiet. Have you ever had him evaluated? My cousin's son was like that. Turned out he needed special classes. The familiar sting of her backhanded comments had lost some potency now that I understood her game. I smiled blandly and joined the others, settling on the couch next to Dad while Sarah perched on the armrest of Mark's recliner, her hand possessively on his shoulder. About an hour into the game, Sarah excused herself to check on the snacks. 10 minutes later, Jason appeared at my side, his expression neutral but his eyes intense. Mom, can I have your phone? My battery died, he asked casually. I handed it over, noting how he angled his body away from the others. Everything okay down there? I asked. Yeah. Sarah came down earlier to make a call. She said the reception was better in the basement. His emphasis was subtle but unmistakable. After a few minutes of pretend phone use, he handed it back with a barely perceptible nod. It wasn't until we were driving home that Jason revealed what had happened. She wasn't checking on snacks, he said, his voice quiet but firm. She went to the basement to make a private call. I was playing the racing game and she didn't notice me because I had my back to her. She was talking to someone named Diane about Uncle Mark's finances. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did she say exactly? She said, Once we're married, I'll have full access to the hardware store accounts. Mark trusts me completely. Jason's ability to mimic Sarah's tone was uncanny. The family business is worth way more than he realizes. His sister won't be a problem. I've already convinced his parents she's financially incompetent. A chill ran through me. Are you sure that's what she said, honey? Jason looked at me with an expression too serious for his 12 years. I recorded it. You what? He pulled out his own phone and opened an app one didn't recognize. I downloaded this after I saw her go through your purse. It records audio really clearly, even from across the room. The recording was slightly muffled but unmistakable. Sarah's voice came through clearly. Mark has no idea about the expansion opportunity in Riverdale. That property alone could triple the business value if we play it right. His father's too old-fashioned to see it, and Melissa's too. Well, you know how she is. Once we're married, we can make some real changes. I pulled the car over, my hands shaking too much to drive safely. Jason, when did you learn to do this? He shrugged, suddenly looking his age again. YouTube tutorials. It's not hard. That night, after Jason went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, replaying the recording. I tried to find an innocent explanation. Maybe Sarah was just excited about business opportunities? But combined with her snooping through my financial information and the estate planning documents, a disturbing pattern emerged. The next morning, I woke to find Jason at the kitchen counter with a notebook filled with neat handwriting. What's this? I asked, pouring my coffee. I made a plan, he explained. We need more evidence. See, I've listed all the family events coming up where Sarah might talk about her plans. The list was methodical. Sunday dinner at my parents', Mark's birthday barbecue, the engagement party, dress fittings, rehearsal dinner planning. Next to each event, Jason had noted recording opportunities, and who might be there. Honey, I said carefully, I'm not sure we should turn this into some kind of spy mission. Mom. His voice was steady. I heard her yesterday. She's trying to take advantage of Uncle Mark and turn everyone against you. Nobody else sees it. I studied my son, his serious eyes, the determined set of his jaw. In many ways he was still a child who loved video games and comic books, but in others he showed a maturity beyond his years. The divorce had forced him to grow up faster than I would have liked. Let me think about it, I said finally. This is complicated adult stuff. At the family barbecue the following weekend, I watched Sarah through new eyes. Her behavior was flawless on the surface. Helping my mother with the food, laughing at my father's jokes, showing Mark constant affection. But now I noticed the calculated glances, the way she positioned herself to overhear conversations, the subtle redirections when certain topics arose. Jason stayed close to his cousins, seemingly absorbed in their games, but I caught him watching Sarah when no one was looking. As the afternoon wore on, she stepped away to take a phone call by the garden shed. Jason casually wandered in that direction with his cousin's football. Later, as we helped clean up, he whispered, "Got it." She was talking about the wedding seating arrangement, putting some guy named Lawrence at our table because he's an investor who might be interested in the new direction for the store. Jason, I said, torn between concern and grudging admiration, how are you getting these recordings without her noticing? He grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. I'm just a kid with a phone. Nobody pays attention to what I'm doing. That night he showed me his collection. 4 recordings now, each one revealing a little more about Sarah's intentions. The most damning was from after the barbecue when she thought everyone had left. The family has no idea what that property is really worth, her voice said clearly. Once we redirect the business profits, we'll have enough for the lake house within 2 years. Melissa won't get a penny, I've made sure of that. Looking at my son's earnest face, I knew we had crossed a line. What had started as defensive observation had become active investigation. Part of me wanted to stop, to find another way to address my concerns. But another part, the part that had been systematically undermined and isolated from my own family, wanted vindication. We need to be careful, I told Jason, closing his notebook. What we're doing, it's not something to take lightly. I know, Mom, he said, suddenly looking very young again. But nobody messes with our family. Not even if they're trying to join it. The next morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. The recordings weighed on my conscience, but the evidence was too concerning to ignore. I brewed a pot of coffee and cleared the kitchen table while Jason was at school. We needed a systematic approach. When Jason came home, he found me surrounded by a timeline I'd created on poster board, marking all the significant family events leading up to the wedding. "What's all this?" he asked, dropping his backpack on a chair. "If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right," I explained. "We need to be strategic about when and where we gather information." His face lit up as he examined my work. "Like a real investigation." I nodded, though the gravity of what we were planning settled heavily on my shoulders. "Jason, before we go any further, I need you to understand something. What we're doing, recording people without their knowledge, it's not something I would normally condone. In most circumstances it would be wrong." He studied me with those perceptive eyes. "But Sarah is trying to hurt our family. Sometimes you have to break small rules to stop something really bad." The wisdom in his words struck me. When had my son developed such a clear moral compass? "Yes, but we need boundaries. We only record Sarah when she's discussing family business or finances. Nothing personal between her and Mark that doesn't relate to her plans." Jason nodded solemnly. "I promise." We spent the evening mapping out opportunities. The upcoming Christmas party at my parents' house would be first. Sarah always brought her friend Diane, the same person she'd been speaking with in the basement. Then there was Mark's bachelor weekend in January, when Sarah would be staying at her sister's. Finally, the rehearsal dinner planning session at my parents' house in February. "What about her home office?" Jason suggested. "Uncle Mark said she handles all their paperwork now." I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Recording conversations in public areas is one thing, but snooping through someone's private papers is another level entirely." Jason looked disappointed but didn't argue. I didn't realize then how that boundary would be tested. The Christmas party arrived with a flurry of activity. My mother had invited the extended family and several family friends, including Sarah's inner circle. The house was decorated beautifully, with Sarah taking credit for the elegant table settings that my mother had actually arranged. Jason moved through the party with remarkable stealth for a 12-year-old. He'd positioned his tablet on the bookshelf in the living room, angled to capture the couch area where Sarah typically held court. He'd tested the recording quality the day before when we'd stopped by to help with preparations. "All set," he whispered as he passed me in the hallway, accepting a tray of appetizers to distribute. I mingled nervously, half listening to conversations while keeping an eye on Sarah. She was in her element, charming my relatives with stories and compliments. Around 9, I noticed her pull Diane aside near the bookshelf. Jason appeared at my elbow with uncanny timing. "They're talking," he murmured before disappearing again. Later that night, after we'd said our goodbyes and helped clean up, Jason retrieved his tablet. We waited until we were home to review the recording. "I've been working on Harold and Elaine." Sarah's voice came through clearly, referring to my parents. "They're practically eating out of my hand now. The new estate plan is coming along perfectly." Diane's voice responded, "What about the brother? Is he still clueless?" "Mark." Sarah laughed softly. "He's so trusting it's almost too easy. He's given me access to all the accounts already. Did you know the family business has been in a prime location for 50 years? The property value alone is worth millions, but they're running it like some mom-and-pop shop." "And the sister?" "Melissa." Another laugh. "She's suspicious, but it doesn't matter. No one in the family takes her seriously anymore. I've made sure of that." I felt sick listening to the casual way she discussed manipulating my family. The worst part was that it was working. My parents had indeed been treating me differently, questioning my judgment and excluding me from family decisions. January brought Mark's bachelor party weekend. He and his friends headed to a ski resort, leaving Sarah alone. She'd mentioned staying at her sister's place in Portsmouth, but when I drove by feeling only slightly guilty about the surveillance, her car wasn't there. "Maybe she's shopping," Jason suggested when I told him. "For 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon?" Something didn't add up. Jason's expression turned thoughtful. "Uncle Mark gave you a key to their house for emergencies, right? What if there was a water leak we needed to check on?" "Jason, no," I said firmly. "That crosses the line." But the next day my brother called in a panic. "Mel, I forgot to pay the insurance bill before I left and it's due tomorrow. The paperwork is in Sarah's office, but she's not answering her phone. Could you possibly stop by and look for it?" You still have that spare key, right? It felt like fate was intervening. Sure, Mark. What am I looking for exactly? It's a blue folder labeled insurance. Should be on her desk or in the filing cabinet. I picked Jason up from school explaining the situation. This is not permission to snoop, I warned. We're going in for the insurance paperwork, period. His expression remained neutral, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Mark and Sarah's house was quiet when we arrived. I headed straight for her office, a converted bedroom with a sleek desk and matching filing cabinets. The blue folder wasn't on the desk. As I opened the filing cabinet, Jason called from across the room, "Mom, look at this." He was pointing at the computer screen which Sarah had left on. A document was open, a draft letter to my parents' estate attorney on letterhead I didn't recognize. "Jason, we shouldn't be looking at her computer," I admonished, though my eyes were already scanning the text. The letter referenced concerns about Melissa's financial judgment, and suggested a protective trust arrangement that would give Sarah and Mark oversight of any inheritance I received. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and took a quick photo of the screen. "This is wrong," I whispered even as I pressed the shutter button. "Not as wrong as what she's doing," Jason replied, his young face set with certainty. We found the insurance folder and left quickly, but not before Jason spotted something else. A locked drawer in Sarah's desk. "What do you think is in there?" he wondered aloud. "Something we're not going to find out today," I replied firmly, ushering him out. That night I couldn't sleep. The photo of the letter weighed on my conscience, but the content disturbed me even more. Sarah wasn't just trying to isolate me socially, she was actively working to cut me out of the family financially. 2 weeks before the wedding, our opportunity came. Sarah and Mark were attending a venue walkthrough, and my parents asked if Jason and I could help organize some paperwork at their house for the rehearsal dinner. "Sarah left her planning binder here," my mother mentioned. "She said you could use it for reference, but be careful with it. She's very particular." The moment my parents left to pick up the catering samples, Jason and I exchanged a look. The binder sat innocently on the dining room table, filled with wedding details and vendor information. "Check the back pocket," Jason suggested. There, tucked behind reception seating charts, we found what we'd been looking for, a handwritten list of post-wedding priorities that included transition store ownership paperwork, revise Harold/Elaine's estate docs, and secure vacation property with Q2 profits. I photographed everything, my heart racing. "This is it, Jason. This is the proof." He nodded solemnly. "Now we just need to decide when to use it." The wedding was 10 days away. We had our evidence. The only question remaining was, how and when would we reveal what we knew? The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, mocking my churning stomach and racing thoughts. I stood in my childhood bedroom, now converted to a guest room but still holding whispers of my youth in the faded marks on the doorframe where Dad had measured my height each year. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Jason as he struggled with his tie in the mirror. We had debated for days about when to reveal our evidence. In the end, Jason had made the decision. "We have to do it at the reception," he'd insisted. "If we tell Uncle Mark before, Sarah will just deny everything and make us look jealous. We need witnesses." Now, as the reality of our plan loomed before us, doubt crept in. "Maybe we should just talk to Mark privately after the honeymoon," I suggested weakly. Jason turned to me, his expression startlingly adult. "Mom, by then it'll be too late. She'll have legal access to everything." He was right, but the weight of what we were about to do pressed down on me like a physical force. We weren't just exposing Sarah's deception. We were about to shatter my brother's wedding day. "You look beautiful, honey," my mother said as she entered the room. She fussed with my bridesmaid dress, a hideous mauve creation that Sarah had insisted would complement my complexion. I knew it had been deliberately chosen to make me look washed out next to the other bridesmaids in their flattering blush tones. "Thanks, Mom." I forced a smile, wondering if this would be the last normal moment between us. After today, everything would change. Either my family would finally see Sarah for who she really was, or I'd be forever branded as the jealous sister who tried to ruin her brother's wedding. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of organ music and formal vows. I stood beside Sarah's college friends in the line of bridesmaids, watching my brother beam at his bride. Did he have any idea who he was really marrying? The woman beneath the veil and satin was nothing like the persona she presented to him. "You may now kiss the bride," the minister announced, and the church erupted in applause. I clapped mechanically, catching Jason's eye in the third row. He gave me a subtle nod. At the reception, my anxiety reached a fever pitch. We had timed everything carefully. Jason had created a video compilation of Sarah's most damning recordings, edited together with photographs of the documents we'd discovered. He had loaded it onto a USB drive that was currently burning a hole in his suit pocket. The venue's projection system, intended for the best man's speech and photo slideshow, would be our platform. "Just act normal," I whispered to Jason at our assigned table, notably the farthest from the head table where Mark and Sarah sat with my parents and her family. "I know, Mom," he replied, picking at his chicken. "I've got this." The reception progressed predictably. First dance, parent dances, cake cutting. Sarah played the blushing bride to perfection, making a show of feeding Mark cake gently while guests cooed at the romantic gesture. I knew from her private conversations that she found these traditions mind-numbingly provincial, but no one would guess it from her performance. As dinner wound down, Sarah made her way toward our table, a fixed smile on her face. "Melissa, I'm so glad you could be part of our special day." Her voice dripped with insincere sweetness. "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied, my own smile equally forced. She glanced around the table, cousins I rarely saw, a couple of Mark's colleagues, before her gaze landed on my son. "And Jason, don't you look handsome in your suit?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I hope you're behaving yourself. Children should be seen and not heard at formal events, you know." Something in her tone made my protective instincts flare. The subtle put-down, the implicit warning. She sensed a threat from my 12-year-old son. "Actually," she continued, placing a hand on my shoulder, "would you mind helping clear some of these tables? The catering staff is falling behind and I'd like to start the dancing soon." The request, more in order, was delivered with a smile, but the message was clear. Know your place. Around us, conversations quieted as guests pretended not to listen. "I'm a bridesmaid, Sarah, not waitstaff," I replied evenly. Her smile tightened. "Oh, I know. But family pitches in, right? That's what you're always saying, how important family is." She gave a tinkling laugh, drawing others into the moment. "Besides, it's not like you're unfamiliar with this kind of work." The reference to my part-time catering job during college, work I'd taken on to help support the family after Dad's heart attack, was deliberate. A reminder of my lower status in her envisioned hierarchy. From the head table, my mother called out, "Melissa, would you please just help? It's Sarah's day after all." The public request left me no graceful exit. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as I stood, aware of the eyes following me. This was exactly how Sarah operated, maneuvering me into situations where refusing made me look difficult, where compliance reinforced my subordinate position. "You should use your brainless child to help," I heard my mother-in-law stage whisper to someone, followed by muffled laughter. The comment struck like a physical blow. They weren't even trying to hide their disdain anymore. I looked at Jason, whose face had gone rigid with anger. "It's okay," I murmured, squeezing his shoulder as I moved past him. But it wasn't okay. As I reluctantly gathered plates from an empty table, I saw Jason slip away from our table. My heart raced. We had planned for me to create a distraction while he set up the video, but not like this. Not with this fresh humiliation burning in both our minds. From across the room, I watched in horror as my son approached the DJ stand where the microphone sat. The timing was all wrong. The best man hadn't given his speech yet, the formal proceedings weren't complete. But the fire in Jason's eyes told me he had abandoned our careful plan. "Jason, wait," I whispered, though he was too far away to hear me. The DJ, seeing a young boy in a suit approach, smiled and bent down to hear his request. A moment later he handed Jason the microphone. "Excuse me, everyone," Jason's voice rang out, surprisingly steady for a 12-year-old addressing a room of 200 adults. "I have a surprise for the bride." Conversations died away. Sarah's head whipped around, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Jason, this isn't the time for," Mark began, half rising from his seat. "I think it's exactly the time," Jason interrupted, his young voice firm. "Before everyone congratulates Aunt Sarah on joining our family, you should know what she really thinks about us." The room went utterly silent. I froze, plates still in my hands, as Jason pulled the USB drive from his pocket and handed it to the bewildered DJ. Could you play this on the projector, please? It's my wedding gift for Aunt Sarah. The DJ looked uncertainly toward the head table. Sarah had plastered a tight smile on her face, but I could see panic in her eyes. It's just a silly video, she called out with forced lightness. Why don't we save it for later, sweetie? Right now we're about to start the... Please play it, Jason insisted, his voice cracking slightly. Everyone should hear what Aunt Sarah says when she thinks no one is listening. The first recording began to play, Sarah's unmistakable voice filling the banquet hall. Once I'm married, I'll finally get control of the family assets. Mark has no idea what's coming. The reception hall froze in collective shock as Sarah's voice continued to play through the speakers. Her words echoed in the sudden silence, damning and undeniable. The color drained from Mark's face as recording after recording played, each one revealing more of Sarah's calculated deception. Turn it off, Sarah commanded, her carefully constructed poise crumbling. She lunged toward the DJ booth, but Diane, her own friend, stepped back from her as if suddenly contaminated by association. No one moved to stop the playback. When the recording of Sarah explicitly discussing how she'd manipulated my parents' estate planning documents played, my mother let out an audible gasp. My father's hand went to his chest in a gesture that made my heart stutter with fear. The final clip was the most damning. Sarah laughing with Diane about how easy it had been to isolate me from the family. All it took was a few strategically placed comments. They were already primed to see her as the family disappointment. I just had to nudge them along. When the screen went dark, the silence was absolute. Jason stood alone by the DJ booth, his small shoulders squared despite the weight of what he'd just done. I moved to his side, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and fear for what would come next. Mark was the first to break the silence. Is this some kind of joke? He asked, his voice hollow with disbelief. I wish it were, I answered softly. We have more evidence if you need it. Sarah's recovery was swift and practiced. This is ridiculous, she declared, forcing a laugh. Obviously these recordings have been manipulated. Melissa has always been jealous of me, of us. And to use her child as a pawn, that's a new low even for her. For a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across my brother's face, the familiar pattern of doubt that Sarah had carefully cultivated. My stomach dropped. After everything, would they still choose to believe her over me? Then my father stood. In the half-century I'd known him, I'd never seen him look so old, yet so formidable. The paperwork, he said, his voice gravelly. The estate planning documents. Those weren't falsified. Those changes were made. Sarah brought them to us. The final threads of Sarah's composure unraveled. Harold, you're confused. Remember your heart condition. You shouldn't get upset. My mother rose beside my father, her hand finding his. We're not confused, Sarah. We trusted you. You told us Melissa was hiding financial problems, that she needed supervision for her own good. Sarah's parents stood awkwardly, clearly torn between defending their daughter and the unavoidable evidence of her deception. Her father finally mumbled something about a misunderstanding before retreating toward the exit, his wife following with her head bowed. Guests began to murmur, shifting uncomfortably in their formal wear. The wedding party, trapped at the head table, exchanged horrified glances. Mark hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. The store expansion, he said quietly. The Riverdale property. You said my father thought it was too risky, that Melissa had concerns about the financing. I was trying to protect you. Sarah's voice took on a desperate edge. Your family doesn't understand business. They would have held you back. We could have had everything. We already had everything, Mark replied, his voice breaking. He slowly removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table with a soft clink that somehow cut through the chaos. The aftermath unfolded like a strange dream. Guests departed in awkward clusters, their whispered conversations trailing behind them. Sarah's remaining family closed ranks around her, ushering her away while throwing accusing glances in our direction. The catering staff cleared tables with mechanical efficiency, eyes averted from the family drama. I found myself in a small side room with Mark, our parents, and Jason. My brother sat with his head in his hands, wedding finery incongruous with his devastation. I should have seen it, he kept saying. All the signs were there. She was very convincing, my mother said softly, her own guilt evident in the slump of her shoulders. We all fell for it. Not all of us, my father said, looking at Jason with newfound respect. Your boy saw through her from the start. He turned to me, his eyes glistening. Melissa, I don't know how to begin to apologize for how we've treated you. You believed what you were told by someone you trusted, I replied, the anger I'd been nursing giving way to exhaustion. Sarah manipulated all of us. Jason, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since his moment at the microphone, finally spoke up. Is Uncle Mark going to be okay? Mark raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. He managed a weak smile for his nephew. Eventually. Thanks to you, buddy. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. He reached out and ruffled Jason's hair with genuine affection. Though your timing could have been better. I tried to tell Mom we should do it before the wedding, Jason admitted, but she was worried about hurting you. My brother laughed. A short, hollow sound, but a laugh nonetheless. Better to know now than after she'd gotten her hands on everything. The next morning we gathered at my parents' house. The dining room table, still decorated with wedding rehearsal materials, became command central as we assessed the damage. Mark had already contacted his lawyer about the marriage annulment process. My father was scheduling appointments to reverse the estate planning changes. We found something else, my father said, sliding a folder across the table to me. Sarah convinced us to create a separate trust for you, claiming it was for your protection. In reality, it gave her and Mark control over your portion as trustees. I opened the folder to find the trust documents, along with a handwritten note in Sarah's elegant script detailing how to structure it to minimize Melissa's ability to challenge decisions. I never signed these, my father continued, his voice tight with controlled anger. Something felt wrong even when I believed her other claims. I kept delaying, saying I needed more time to review. My mother reached for my hand across the table. We should have talked to you directly. That's what family does. Mark nodded, his expression somber. That's what we need to remember going forward. No secrets, no intermediaries. We talk to each other directly, even when it's difficult. A month later we started a new tradition. Family dinner at my small house every first Sunday. Nothing fancy, just honest conversation around my scratched kitchen table. The annulment had been finalized quickly given the circumstances, though Sarah had attempted to claim some of Mark's assets despite the brevity of their marriage. The judge actually laughed when my lawyer played the recordings, Mark explained as he helped me wash dishes after dinner. Said it was the most clear-cut case of fraud in a marriage he'd seen in 20 years on the bench. Any regrets? I asked, passing him a plate to dry. He considered the question seriously. About ending it? Not for a second. About not seeing through her sooner? Every day. He glanced toward the living room where Jason was teaching our father a new card game. Thank God for that kid of yours. He's pretty special, I agreed, feeling a surge of pride. Though I've had to have several conversations with him about the ethics of recording people without permission. Mark laughed, a genuine sound that had been rare in recent weeks. Maybe he has a future in private investigation. Or family protection, I suggested. He takes that role very seriously. As we joined the others in the living room, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for months. My parents were laughing at something Jason had said, their faces relaxed and present in a way they hadn't been during Sarah's reign. Mark was beginning to show glimmers of his old self, the brother I'd grown up admiring. We had all been deceived, but in the aftermath, we'd found something valuable. A renewed commitment to protecting each other and a deeper appreciation for honest communication. Sarah had nearly succeeded in tearing us apart, but in the end she'd inadvertently made us stronger. Later that night as I tucked Jason into bed, he asked, "Do you think we did the right thing, Mom?" I sat on the edge of his bed, considering the question carefully. I think we did a hard thing for the right reasons. Sometimes that's the best we can do. He nodded thoughtfully. Next time someone messes with our family, we'll be ready. Next time, I said, smoothing his hair back, we'll make sure there isn't a next time. That's what our monthly dinners are about, staying connected so nobody can come between us again. I like that better than spying, he admitted with a yawn. As I turned out his light, I silently agreed. The truth had cost us a wedding day, but it had saved us something far more precious. Our family's future rebuilt on honesty and trust.